In the past, I had worked on I was trying to get a very light fry color in a very long fry application. And so what we did was we boosted the bleach up. We took the chlorine way high to try to get the flour as white as possible to hold up with the greatest amount of fry tolerance. Now, the result of this test was it came out lighter, but when you bit into this, it was a piece of chicken in this case, when you bit into it, the shell fractured. And if you looked at the interface, the oil had not penetrated very far beyond the outer layer, so you actually had dry breading mix still at that interface. So essentially the test was a failure, but the effect was really cool because it started to show some of the attributes of the hardness, the brittleness, and in this case, how it prevented high levels of oil absorption. Now, even though you wouldn't want to serve a product like this or make a product like this, we can take advantage of different levels of that attribute and be able to control oil absorption and be able to give you that hardness by combining it with other flour choices. There are other types of flours that are commonly used in formulation for batters and interfaces. Common amongst these are corn flours, and here's a couple of examples of corn flour. You've got yellow corn flour and you've got white corn flour. Each of these are commonly used. Obviously, you would expect the yellow corn flour to provide you some color. It tends to give you a more golden brown color. It's commonly used for that purpose. It also typically gives you lower viscosities in a batter, so you're able to increase your solids potential to give you crisper coatings. This is particularly useful when you speak of tempura coatings, and they're commonly used at high levels in tempura systems. It's also a very economical ingredient because corn is typically, in most markets, cheaper than wheat. And one other thing that's unique about corn flours is that it can be used for viscosity control because there's a whole range of different viscosities that are available of corn flour. From this, you can dial in a very tight viscosity range for what your batter targets are for your pickup targets. White corn flour, commonly used, paler color, you would get less color development. If you're wanting lighter colors, it's not uncommon to use this. It's appropriate to use high levels in batters. I would caution you, however, if you start to use high levels of corn flour in a breading application on the outer coating, you'll start to get a little bit of a sandy look. Not necessarily a negative in all cases, but some people don't prefer that appearance. Some other types of flours that are commonly used, rice flour. Very common. As we spoke of rice starch before, we'll also speak of rice flour commonly used in oriental applications. It shares a lot of the same traits as the corn flour. It has low viscosity development. It has a lot of solids potential. You can add a lot of this into a batter before you start to build a lot of viscosity. It's also able to give you a certain amount of crispness. It's reputed to give you crispness. And I would tell you that this, in combination with some other strategies that we spoke of before, flour selection, can give you crisp products. It's also reputed to give you reduced oil absorption. While this isn't something I've experienced by using rice flour by itself, in combination with some other ingredients, we can control oil absorption very effectively. Another type of flour that's commonly used is soy flour. Now, soy flour comes in a lot of different forms. Soy flour is high protein, so it has some adhesive qualities to it. It develops a fair amount of color, so you get some browning. In combination with other ingredients, you get reduced oil absorption. And even though soy sometimes has a bad reputation when it comes to flavor characteristics, used at appropriate levels, it can give a rich, nutty flavor that a lot of people find appealing. Now, there's different types of soy flour that we can use for different applications. You've got the defatted soy flour, which is commonly used, but you've also got a lecithinated soy flour, which may be used in batter applications if foaming, for example, was an issue for you. So these are several of the flours that are commonly used. There are others, but these are the ones that you most frequently see in batter applications. We've spoken a little bit about the attributes of flours and the different regional attributes. Let's talk a little bit about the milling process now and how we extract wheat flour from a wheat berry. On this diagram here, you can see a typical wheat kernel. What it indicates is the endosperm, the bran, and the germ. Now, the endosperm is where the starchy portion of the kernel is. That's what you're trying to extract through the milling process. The milling process goes through a series of grinds and rolls and sifters, so you're able to extract that endosperm from the bran and from the germ. The bran is what contains most of the ash content that we've referred to earlier, and the germ is what has the oil. When we speak of ash, a lower ash flour means that we've been more effective at removing more of that bran from the endosperm layer. And there's different siftings you can do to even lower the ash down to very low levels. That actually increase your cost, so you have to weigh against whether or not you get the advantage of those attributes through the further milling and sifting processes. But what we have here with this diagram is the bran is separated off from the endosperm. The bran can be sold by itself. You see wheat bran sold in a lot of cereals, and it's available on the market. The germ is extracted into oils. What's left is the endosperm, and that is what we call the flour that you are purchasing that we're formulating with. This module is going to talk about formulations of batters and interfaces and functional ingredients. We're going to start off discussing pre-dusts. Pre-dusts are a foundation coat that is used to directly form the interface at the meat and provides a foundation for further pickup for further coatings that are added on top of it. There are different types of pre-dust that we're going to address, and we're also going to talk about whether or not it's appropriate to pre-dust in all cases, what the benefits are, and when perhaps you might not want to pre-dust. Pre-dust directly establishes pickup potential. Should you choose to use one, the more pre-dust you pick up, the more coating you're able to get on a product. Also, pre-dusts are used for flavor delivery. As we talk of flavor and talk about fried products in particular, the closer you can get flavors to the substrate, the more you stand to retain them throughout the cook process because it's somewhat shielded by the outer layers, the coatings that go on top of it. Once again, just to repeat, you get more flavor impact the closer flavors are to the meat. Your greatest flavor impacts in the marinade process, then pre-dust, batter, and you get the greatest visual but the least amount of flavor in the breading coat. Let's talk about the different types of pre-dust that are available. Here's a couple of examples of pre-dusts that are commonly used. This one is a cracker meal based pre-dust. These are typically used, they can be used in poultry applications, they can be used in seafood applications. The advantage of these is they're very free-flowing, they provide for very even coverage. It also tends to build up on top of itself, so you get a very nice heavy coating of pre-dust that also makes for very nice coating when you add the batter. So these are very commonly used. Also, you've got another one. This is flour based, but it's also a higher protein flour that we use. The more protein that you have in pre-dust, protein likes to be attracted to protein. So the protein you have on the surface of a substrate wants to stick to the protein that's present in the flour. This may have other types of additional proteins, say egg whites or eggs or wheat gluten. These types of things add to the adhesive properties of a pre-dust. Now let's talk about whether it's appropriate to use a pre-dust and what conditions. This is very substrate dependent whether or not a pre-dust is going to be appropriate. Here's a couple of examples of substrates. What you'll see is this is a cube steak product. This is a very rough surface. This has been actually cubed, so you've got high points, you've got peaks and valleys. Where this chicken tender, in particular, is a very smooth surface. On the smoother surfaces, you're going to tend to want to use pre-dust. It provides the high protein, you get the protein sticking to the protein, it gives you a very tight interface, a very tight adhesive property. What happens with a textured product, such as this chicken fried steak, is these pre-dusts oftentimes want to bridge across the tops of those valleys. And so what you're doing is, right from the beginning, starting to make voids. And those voids, as you have the escape of moisture, that moisture is going to want to go somewhere, it's going to try and push out that pre-dust. What you have the potential of, in this case, is getting a lesser adhesive interface. And so, in this case, it's probably more appropriate to do just a wet coating. So you would do a batter and then a bread on top of this. Where on a piece of chicken tender, you would either want to do you could do a one pass where you just have the dry coating and fry it, or you could go pre-dust batter bread where you are trying to get a little bit thicker and more of a coating. Earlier we had defined batters as a liquid application that defines the interface and builds a foundation for further coatings. There are several different types of batters that we have demonstrated here, and I wanted to walk you through each of the different types. We begin with an adhesive batter. This is the one that is specifically applied to coated systems where we were looking for an adhesion to a substrate. In this case, on this chicken tender, for example, what you've got is a substrate with a very tight interface against this. The coating system is stuck very tightly against that substrate. This is formulated to be an adhesive type of batter. There are other types of batters, however, that include perhaps this cohesive batter, where the batter builds on itself and forms its own structure. With this pancake, for example, you've got a product that is starting to build on itself. This is actually a batter that is meant to stand alone. Another type of cohesive batter that's a little bit of a hybrid is demonstrated by this corn dog here. This corn dog, you'll see that adhesion is not the primary concern. You want it to loosely associate with the hot dog that's inside, but you want mostly for it to be a cohesive to itself where it forms a nice puff shell. And the final type of batter that we'll discuss today is a tempura type system. This right here is the Southeastern Mills all-purpose batter that we've used to make a tempura fish. The characteristics of this are it's a crispy coating system that's traditional of the English fish and chip style, where you have a loose association with the substrate itself. It forms a nice, it sticks to the substrate, but you don't want a very heavy interface here. This is where the moistures go into the coating system. So this is a traditional tempura type system. Characteristic, it's a wet application, wet outer coating, crispy outer shell that stays crispy. Another ingredient that's typically used, commonly used in batter breading applications is starches. Here are several different types of starches in front of me that with the different properties demonstrated. So I want to talk through each of these and talk to why we might select one starch over another. What you've got here are the different varieties. This is a corn starch. This is a wheat starch. This is a rice starch, and this is a specialized kind of corn starch called waxy maize. Each of these have different purposes, different functions, why we might select one over the other. Let's talk, to begin with price. This dense starch is your least expensive. It's the most common starch. If you go to the grocery store, buy a box of cornstarch, this is the type of starch that you would expect to see. It's very commonly used in coating systems because it's a film former. It forms a gel. So that gives you the adhesive properties that you look for when you formulate for coating systems. It gives nice adhesive qualities. What you see with the wheat starch is it retains a lot of the same properties, but it doesn't have the rigid gel. Wheat starches are commonly used in formulation for coating systems, and it, like I said, has a lot of the same types of properties. Even though the gel, in this case, you've got a nice sliceable gel. In this case, your gel is there, but it's a weaker gel. Now, when we come over here to rice starch, you see rice starch is typically used for the oriental applications. A lot of time they're specified. It's an expected ingredient when it comes to the formulation of the oriental style tempuras or oriental coating systems. It has a lot of the same properties as the wheat starch, but from this you'll see this actually has a higher set temperature to make this gel than this does. And so this didn't form as rigid a gel. There's some gelling properties here, but it's basically, it shows to be a thickener. And on the other end, you've got waxy maize. Waxy maize is a starch that is typically not used for formulation and coating systems because when we speak of interfaces, this has no gelling properties, no film forming properties at all to it. So if this was used, you would start to get what people refer to as a gummy interface that's typically associated negatively with coating systems. However, this is a perfectly good starch when you're formulating things like gravies. This is appropriate. The nice clearing, the clear gel properties of it, the long texture, it breaks down quickly in your mouth. It's very appropriate and makes the best gravies using this types of starch. So this right here is kind of a spread of starches and why we may select one starch over another as we formulate.